Hi guys, Jonathan here again, this time with something that features in my book. It's a bit late for a book plug. We've sold out at the Royal Armouries shop. Thank you to everyone that bought one. You can still get it if you're interested at the Headstamp Publishing website. But the reason I bring it up is, as I say, because this thing, among others, are in there. So this is the Thorpe EM1 automatic rifle. And it sits pretty much in the middle of the British bullpup firearms story. Just in case you're not aware, a bullpup firearm named after a bulldog puppy, is short and squat and ugly, but can still kind of latch onto your trouser leg and do you some harm. Lost control of the analogy there, but that's what it's based on. Is a firearm with the working parts, with the breech in particular, behind the grasping area, the grip, or the trigger if you prefer. So it's what John Garand called the cart before the horse concept, which I quite like. Anyway, so in the 40s, Britain was looking at what Nazi Germany had done with the Sturmgewehr, this reduced power cartridge that means you get the capability of a rifle with that of a submachine gun, so automatic fire but reasonably accurate on semi-automatic. Very keen on that, and decided to come up with a slightly beefier sort of top-end intermediate cartridge, arguably, the 280 or 7mm as it was later called. New firearms to be designed around that cartridge, narrowed down to two quite quickly in 1947. One was the EM2, which is a bit more famous and a bit sort of Guccier looking, I think, than the EM1. Nonetheless, both are automatic rifles. Now, in British parlance, that is what I've just described, essentially the British version of a Sturmgewehr. Somehow, they favoured this bullpup configuration. That's surprisingly unclear in the historical record, except that the idea was, well, it's not that unclear, actually. They do state what their rationale was, and that was to remove the buttstock and therefore reduce weight, because the big idea here, as in the States, but they wanted a more powerful cartridge, whole other story, was a lightweight rifle capable of automatic fire. That's pretty much what everyone's looking at. Different ways of doing that. So the EM1 was, spoiler alert, the loser in this two-horse race toward trials between Britain, the United States, Belgium, Canada, the sort of forerunners of NATO, as to what would be the best service rifle for them and potentially for the whole gang. That's really the EM2 story, so I won't labour that one. So if the EM2 is the road not travelled, because double spoiler alert, that didn't really pan out either, then this is kind of like the hard shoulder, I suppose, / escape lane, breakdown lane. Yeah, I've definitely lost control of the analogy there. Point is, it went down to two from four potential designs in 1947 from the armament design establishment, the British sort of research and development section for small arms, and the other two were essentially paper guns that didn't go anywhere. Stanley Thorpe was leading a design team of one, seemingly, to produce this thing, whereas Stefan Kenneth Jansen, as his name was anglicised to, being Polish, he had a bigger design team and a lot more success, and arguably, well, not really arguably, he had the better design. And so that went on and went into trials and then failed later on instead. So this thing, in contrast to the EM2, which was a machined from solid receiver, the more traditional way of manufacturing, this embraced the stamped steel that Germany had been quite successful with, and internally the mechanism of the Gerät 06, not the 06H, which was just roller delayed, but the one with the gas system on it. Now, I'm not going to go into the technical details. There's already a very good Forgotten Weapons video on this very rifle. We have several, but this one's the most complete, over on the Forgotten Weapons channel. So check that out for a full strip down and let your mind boggle at how unbelievably complex this thing is. A quick word on Thorpe, actually. He was a civilian employee of the ADE, so he didn't have a military rank. We don't know much about him. He was appointed by the War Office as a mechanical engineering draftsman in 1932, so we know sort of where his career started. Ended up with the ADE, either well, it was the Armament Design Department prior to being the ADE, but anyway. So that's the beginning of his career, and then we know a bit about the end of his career in 1966, when he appeared in the New Year's Honours List with an OBE, Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. That's what OBE stands for. So he's clearly recognised for his contribution to the war effort and to small arms design. So I'm sure there's more to be discovered about Thorpe, but that's as much as I could turn up when researching the book. He did hold a civil service grade of Engineer Grade 1, by the way. And by 66, he was, or the ADE equivalent, was back at Royal Small Arms Factory, Enfield. And so that's in 1966, so only another decade on, and we're on to SA-80. But Thorpe had nothing to do with SA-80, so far as I know. This one's serial number 4, by the way. You probably see it on the receiver there. You can see that stamped steel construction, the reinforcing ribs on one side only. The stamped steel trigger housing is rather interesting. It's hard to make out on camera, but above those walnut grip scales is actually a very thin walnut veneer on the trigger mechanism, on the lower receiver itself, which is bizarre. Walnut veneer cheek piece, fully sort of enveloping the box section receiver at the rear. We've got 2 handguards here, a permanently attached rear one and a quick detach front one, because to adjust the gas system you had to be able to pop this forward. A bipod mount built into that handguard, or rather to this bit, which was actually on the very first prototype EM2 as well, which sadly no longer survives. So they were going for something, well, I guess something like the FAMAS with its built-in bipod, but this was optional, you could add it. And at the front here, we possibly got the clue for why it has 2 handguards, the bayonet lugs. Now, something you don't often see is an EM1/EM2 bayonet. This is the number 7 Mark 1M for modified. And rather intriguingly, has a combat knife potential, or utility knife potential, in this configuration, and it's like a transformer. You pull this latch, you spin the pommel around, click it into place, and you have a socket bayonet. That slips over the muzzle, of course, onto the lugs, push and twist, and you then have your bayonet. Now, one of the issues, certainly with SA-80, complaints from the Guards regiments was that the weapon's too short for a bayonet. So that's why we have walnut veneer on the underside of the receiver to grasp there, as well as this auxiliary forward handguard. This thing is a bayonet handle. It's designed to give you more reach as a bayonet handle. There's really no other function for this front handguard here, and you could just pop the catch at the bottom and pull that off. I don't want to get into disassembly or I'll go down that rabbit hole. You can perfectly comfortably shoulder and shoot this thing using the rear handguard. Now, funnily enough, it would give you a more modern, stable, extended grip if you wanted to. That's not what it's for. It is a bayonet handle. Also, though, for firing rifle grenades. So the same 2 grasping points with the butt in the ground and the bayonet replaced with the bayonet launcher, which we have but not to hand, turns this thing into a bayonet launching platform. Now that's a good idea. No, a grenade launching platform. Sorry guys, end of a long day. So there you are. That's the EM1, nicknamed Cobra, which is I was going to say a short-lived nickname, but this is a short-lived rifle, as we'll come to in a moment. The short-lived nickname was Mamba, which is what the EM2 was codenamed. Uncharacteristically macho code names for British firearms, I think. But anyway, I mentioned the sheet steel, stamped steel. This was an early effort at stamped steel for the Brits. The prototypes were produced by a Birmingham firm, obviously Birmingham known for its gun making, but also metalworking, and the firm of Turner Brothers were contracted to supply those receivers, or the stampings at the very least. I don't know if it offhand actually, whether it was complete assemblies or not. The prototypes were complete by the end of 1949. Unfortunately, this thing was not going to last much longer, so middling-ish 1950, focus was switched entirely to EM2 for future trials. This thing was discontinued, and I have to admit it was probably the right call. Go and look at that Forgotten Weapons video to see just what a Swiss watchmaker's nightmare this thing is inside. So the final thing to cover here, on top of this carrying handle, is an optical sight, which you'll recognise from the EM2 if you know that rifle at all. And the bit inside the sheet steel cover is the actual sight, so it's extremely small. And it's not quite an optical sight. I mean, it's an optical sight by definition, but it's non-magnifying. It has a permanently etched reticle with ranging graticules on it, marks on it. What it's really meant to do is replace the conventional iron sights of a full-length rifle. The EM2 would end up with emergency backup front and rear sights, but regardless of that, I mean, those really are just for quick aiming. They're too close together, they're too crudely shaped for precise aiming at distance, hundreds of yards distance. Iron sights would be relied upon for. This sight is a replacement for those, because when you shorten the whole gun like this, you make the sight radius, as it's known, much shorter, and every little movement of the front and rear sights is greatly exaggerated by being closer together. The weapon is therefore less accurate. So to give you a single point of aim, that's really what this is. Think of it like more like a reflex sight, but it's intended out for 600 plus yards at that time. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of extra material on the EM1, about which not a huge amount is out there. If you do want more, as I say, there is an excellent Forgotten Weapons video. That series was the inspiration for my book, by the way. I wrote the blog posts that went along with that, and we decided to greatly expand upon those and turn them into my book, which is the other source you might want to get your hands on, either through interlibrary loan if you don't want to spend the money on it. That's absolutely fine. Speaking of money, as always, we have a link in the description as to how you can help us out here at the Royal Armouries Museum. I am still doing what's now quite a long-running series over on the GameSpot YouTube channel as well, so you can catch me here with the other content on the Royal Armouries channel and over on there as well, if you're not already sick of the sight of me by this point. Okay guys, thanks a lot.